Welcome back, Dr. David Sam. Doctor, thanks for staying with us all this time. We appreciate your time and talent. Dr. David Schuler, Superintendent of High School District 214. Thanks for being with us, David. And Susan Burleson, Vice President, Student Success and Communication at Davidson County Community College. Susan, thanks for joining us. Time is always short. We've got a lot of talk, a lot of discussion to have. So what I want to do, I'm going to start with you, Dr. Sam, and if you would, what are the three, four things that you got out of Josh's presentation that are critical to student success that need to be brought into our discussions here for Harper students?
Well, first of all, when Dr. Ender, you asked me to be here, I was thinking about learning, and I've learned a lot. And so it wasn't as much as coming here to share my ideas. I've learned a lot. And so let me quickly run through some things that I took down looking at the materials beforehand. First of all, when I got to Elgin, the VP, the academic affairs area, was called Educational Services. Symbolically, I changed it to teaching and learning and student development so that we could start using that vocabulary often. So it's a vice president, teaching and learning, underscoring the fact that teaching and learning is the most important thing that we do at the institution. There were a couple of things, and I took the notes here, and I will talk about them directly. You talked about the clear pathways to credentials and other intentional structures to support students. First of all, as leaders, we should not be content with random acts of success. It should be intentional. And at Elgin, we made some decisions that really changed the landscape. For a long time, and I know there will be counselors here that may not be happy with this, our counselors were not functioning. We did not have a clear pathway for any student. In fact, we did not record any meetings between counselors and students. They come in, they write a few classes for them, they leave, the student loses it between that place and the next door, they come back, they get something different. And they were not willing to change. And so we eliminated counseling services altogether because they weren't willing to work on the pathway for students. And as you know, the last 2 weeks of the semester, before semester starts, is the heaviest registration period. And over a 7-year period, I would go every Saturday, the 2 Saturdays before classes start, to check on how people were doing, to encourage them, to support them. I was lucky if I found 2 counselors, and they were almost always adjuncts. And so the people to help guide students, 40% of our registration were not there. And there were always excuses. And so eliminating them, we now have academic advisors. And this past fall, I was there one Saturday before school started, and there were 9 academic advisors standing by their doors waiting for students. I almost had tears in my eyes. Because for the first time, someone there to guide them. And so, yes, first, the leadership, as an institution, we decided to eliminate that service. Financial aid area. That was one of our sorest spots. And students need the money to go to school. We were in the past giving students financial aid in November for classes that started in August. They've already started. If they had survived, at that time probably they didn't need it. The semester was done. We gathered the whole area and we've changed it. And so again, talking about internal structures, we changed it to the extent that now, as we speak, starting February 1st, we were packaging for fall Four-year universities are not doing that now. They are focused on admission, and we have started to do those things. And so yes, these are internal things, some of the internal things that we've done to improve, to support the students for success. And incidentally, we're one of the 150, and we have a banner out there, that 150 Aspen. We'll keep moving on.
Ah, good for you. Thanks, Doctor. All right, who are we going to next here? Who do we go? David, come to you.
Yeah, sure. I thought a couple things. First of all, I think this is a really important process for you to engage in, because the pipeline of our students that we're sending to you looks very different than it did 5 years ago, and completely different than it did 10 years ago when I arrived in the district. When I got here 10 years ago, were at about 8% students of poverty. We're now at 33%. And that's really significant. And that means I would encourage you to be very purposeful in some of those conversations related to students of poverty that we may not and you may not have had to include in your conversations previously. I think a couple things that Josh said that were fascinating to me, looking at the schools or the community colleges in Valencia and Miami-Dade, they have incredible, incredible partnerships with their K-12 institutions, and it's very, very seamless. I also found it interesting that Florida has a law that prevents developmental courses from being offered. And those are two places where we're seeing the greatest levels of student success. Santa Barbara College that Josh talked about, they have their community college decided they weren't going to use a college placement exam for developmental courses. And I think most psychometricians would tell you that, grades predict grades, standardized tests predict standardized tests. And so, one of the things that I've planted in Ken's-ear that I hope you guys will at least think about is some sort of a pilot where we can take a look at not requiring a test to determine whether a student places into developmental or not. Because the data is pretty significant, and somebody else can speak to it, I'm sure, much more eloquently than I can. But a student taking a developmental course is really, really challenged to go through and finish community college, and super, super challenged to earn a bachelor's degree. Yeah. So why would we want to put up those roadblocks? And the final thing is, I think it's really important for us to continue the conversation around student success in a purposeful, intentional way. So when a student is starting to fall behind, what interventions and strategies are in place to help that student out? And we were talking with a faculty member a couple months ago about a dual credit course, and they said, well, our expectation is that 50% of the students should pass. And I said, that's so sad.
Yeah.
Why would we ever put a group of kids in a room where we know that 1 out of every 2 is going to fail? That can't be the default. The default has to be, how are we ensuring student success? And anybody going into a conversation that talks about 50% failure, I'm not partnering with, because I would never put my high school students in a situation like that, and that's not acceptable for our high school faculty.
Wow, good stuff. And I think that comment, together with some of the statistics that we saw Josh put on the wall, tells us we don't have to settle at that level. Correct. There are people achieving at higher levels now, and I'm sure it's going to find its way into our conversations in these breakouts. Thank you so much, David. Your vat and cleanup, take us in.
Good morning. Thank you guys for inviting us and allowing me to sit in for Dr. Ritling. She apologizes for not being here. She's very ill. And unfortunately, it was on her birthday, so she not only missed the trip here, but had a very bad birthday. We've heard this presentation before from Dr. Rob Johnstone, and we're very fortunate to be a completion by design college. And so I think one of the things that really rings true for me in the presentation is that you have to be an institution that feels like you have some responsibility to advance student success, and that you don't place the blame on the students or the responsibility on the students. Yes, there needs to be a balance, but as an institution, you have to be willing to take a hard look at your practices, your policies, your procedures, and make the changes that you think will benefit students. So I think a strong focus on what is best for students, not necessarily what students want, not necessarily what this group of faculty or staff want, or this group of faculty and staff want, but what is in the best interest of students. And so I think that's how we've been able to make some of the changes that we've made at Davidson County Community College. Josh mentioned Kay McClenny's, students don't do optional, and that's something that we've really taken to heart. And so we have a lot of things that are mandatory at Davidson County Community College. And, sometimes students will say, tell us what to do, but other times they'll say, I've got to do what? I don't want to do that, and I don't have to do that if I go next door. But we know that it's best for students if they must go to an orientation, if they must see an advisor, communicate with an advisor before they're allowed to register, if we don't allow them to register late. We're very fortunate to have a president who's not purely driven by FTE. FTE matters. You got to keep your doors open, but she will make decisions that she knows will likely lead to a hit in FTE. But the hope is that in the future we will gain that back and we will have more completers, and as we're moving more and more toward performance funding, that's going to matter anyway. We've reorganized around student success. So later today we're going to do a presentation about completion by design, and so we'll talk a little bit about how we did reorganize. We've also changed all the front door experiences, so we now have more of a student success center. We have all the services sort of co-located. We've reversed really the physical space so that what you do first is on the first floor and what you do second is on the second floor, whereas it used to be reversed. We went from a shared or a split model of advising, and again, we'll talk about the details of that this afternoon, to a purely professional centralized advising model. That was probably one of the biggest changes, and we took baby steps in getting to the decision, but once we made the decision, we really took a giant step from faculty advising to a centralized advising model over one semester. We've reformed developmental education in North Carolina. We have a very strong system, and so we have reformed developmental education, and we do use multiple measures for placement. So Davidson has been for 2 years now, using high school GPA and high school record to place students. And so we have seen that about 30% more of our students are going into curriculum level courses, and they would have previously gone into developmental education.
Awesome. You guys have given us so much to think about. I want to get questions teed up for this group, so we're going to get mics around. Let me bring one to start us while we wait, and Josh, I'd like to bring it to you. All of you have added so much richness to this conversation, and Josh, you started it off. I love the way that you talked about learning outcomes, completion, labor market outcomes, and then equity in outcomes. We've heard people talking about student success, but we've heard about challenging populations and changing demographics here. Can you just speak to the issue of how do you get to equity and outcomes with some of these populations with so many barriers? You've talked to us about people getting the results. How are they doing it?
Yeah, so two things. One is keeping your eye on access is really important. We often talk about how we've moved from access to success, and in our view it should be we've moved from access to access and success. Mm-hmm. And so we always look when we go into a college at historically and now, what does your service population look like and what does your college population look like? And if you are not at least fully represented in students who are least likely to access higher education, African American students, Hispanic students, then there's a problem. And I know when Byron McClenny was at Kingsborough Community College, that's the first thing he looked at. And you got to get out into the community and figure out why they're not coming to your campus. So access is one thing to keep an eye on. Now let me answer the success question. We're building, as I mentioned, a curriculum for the next generation of leaders, and there's a unit on equity. And in addition to looking at closing gaps, it's also about increasing absolute levels. So those are the measures that matter. The construct that I think is most important that we've seen, and I'm glad Susan mentioned ending late registration because it's a perfect example. You know, we actually have language around the idea that to achieve equitable outcomes, we have to do this extra set of things for a certain population. And sometimes that makes sense. Colleges will have an emergency financial fund for students who run into trouble, right? You wouldn't want to hand that money out to everybody. That is what we would call a targeted approach, targeted at the population that is struggling to try to, as we say, level the playing field. But sometimes the field just needs to be leveled and changed completely. And we call this the universal approach. So late registration is a perfect example. Every college that's looked at this finds that students who register late are less likely to succeed. And every college I know that's done this, that's ended late registration, has not seen a long-term dip in enrollment, meaning the students who used to register late actually can register on time. And by the way, professors love this because learning starts on the first day and not on the second day and third day, and the second and third week, are they having to catch students up and wonder how they're going to differentiate instruction for students who missed the first 2 weeks of class. I mean, it's really a disaster. So that's a universal approach. Why is it universal? They didn't say, well, we're going to go find the students who would more likely register late and advise them to register on time. They decided to just stop the practice of late registration. And I think the pathways work and the idea that students don't do optional, there are times when our structures are not working for students. And you can achieve more equitable outcomes by changing the structures to align them to what the neediest students need, but say those are going to be the structures that will help everybody. And what we're finding is that they have a disproportionately positive impact for at-risk students. Let me give you one other example. The transfer program at Valencia College with the University of Central Florida guarantees admission if you finish an associate's degree. They got the University of Central Florida to say, you can't transfer here without an associate's degree. Okay, so it's guaranteeing it. Now, some people would say, well, how does that help lower income students? Aren't wealthy students going to game the system? They're going to get a less expensive education in Valencia for 2 years, game the system, and then go off to the University of Central Florida. Well, some people may be holding costs down that way. But if you look at the results at the University of Central Florida, what we're finding is that their transfer population, and it's in the thousands, is twice as diverse as their native student population, right? The students who started as freshmen. And they do just as well as the native student population. The transfers do just as well. And so rather than saying we're going to have a transfer program targeted to a particular population, Valencia said, if we can create a value proposition for all students, that if they finish this associate's, they're going to get into a really very selective 4-year college, we can have a disproportionately positive impact on students of color. So I think that this idea that sometimes it makes sense to have a targeted approach and sometimes to create a universal system for everybody is an important way of thinking about how to achieve equitable outcomes that we've seen across the field.
Awesome, awesome. We have mics, yeah.
Thank you, Doctor. Incredibly informative, inspiring presentation. Bill Kelly, I'm actually a trustee at Harper College, and the question I have is what are some of the economic implications for the institution itself in investing in this kind of infrastructure to help improve student success, student completion, both as far as a cost level up front and long-term effects on the revenue stream for the college. What I'm thinking specifically is if you improve the retention rate,
Correct. Yeah.
You're going to increase the revenue stream. And I don't know whether the Aspen Institute has done any studies as far as the economic implications of investing, the technological investing, the human capital investing for hiring these coaches to help the students improve the early alert system. That's what I'm curious about.
So we have asked about this, and I know that Community College Research Center, Davis Jenkins, has done some research on this. I'll let Susan talk about the pathways side of this, but just a couple of quick comments. When I came into this work, I used to think that the way colleges would do this is that they'd say, okay, we've got to do X, now what's the Y we're going to stop doing? And what we've discovered, in fact, is that excellent colleges don't operate that way. What they're doing is they're learning very quickly what works and what doesn't, and they're stopping things that don't work. I think this is really important, which is that you're right, there's a cost associated with this, but if you have set up systems at the college that allow for you to stop doing things, where people aren't afraid that it's just about losing their jobs, right? But we're going to find work for you, but we're going to stop programs. You're going to have the money to do the things that matter. So I think that the cultures that you see are ones that are driven by data. To stop doing certain things will allow that. That's number one. Number two is some of these interventions do pay for themselves in retention, in increased retention. To be clear, the second-year classes are probably smaller in some cases. They may cost a little bit more, so it's not a one-for-one comparison on the business side in terms of retention, but they will pay for themselves. The last thing I'll say, and I'll let Susan speak about the pathways work, is there is a per pupil, per semester increase in cost to do pathways right and to do advising right. And it's cheaper to deliver a degree, right? The cost per degree comes down, but the way colleges are funded is not by degree, even in performance funding systems. And so there is money that needs to be found. And Susan, maybe you can talk a little bit about the cost implications, because you're pretty advanced in this work.
Well, one of the sort of next steps for completion by design, and we've been working for about a year now on sort of cost efficiency, key performance indicators that will align to our student success performance indicators. So one of the first things that we did as the 3 states, there are cadres of colleges within 3 states, and we all sort of chose one strategy that we had implemented, and we costed those strategies out. And Miami-Dade's the one that stands out the most in my mind, and I'm sure these numbers are not exactly correct, but I want to say they hired about 20 new advisors for their new advising model under their pathways redesign. And it cost the college $1 million or something, but it only took them, I think, 5 semesters in, gains in retention and various other things to make that money back up. So we costed developmental education reform, and what we found was initially we did take a hit and we lost money, but it didn't take long for us to put things in place to ensure that the students who were placing out of developmental education were immediately enrolling in curriculum level math courses. So it does cost more, and it will cost more, but we have fortunately been in a position with grants and with just good financial management within our own college to be able to reallocate resources and put them where we need them.
It sounds like the key is making the decision to stop some things so you can reinvest the money in these kinds of things. And that we've been talking about that since yesterday. Who else has a question? Over here. Guys, get your ideas here. We got about 10 minutes left with this group, and then we're going to have to act on it, so don't get cut out. Go ahead.
Mr. Weiner, I'll direct this question to you, but I would love to hear from the panel. Your keynote, one of the main lessons I took was that if we were to pursue a Pathways program, one of the requirements is to thin out the catalog of courses. And I was wondering if you could speak to any of the trends among the colleges across the country who are taking the Pathways approach with respect to the kinds of courses that get cut out of the catalog of classes. Are there obvious trends? Perhaps a follow-up would be, why are those the wrong courses to be in the catalog?
Yeah, so I don't think it's a matter of wrong courses. I think it's a matter of clearer paths for students. And the hardest work, and Susan, you could talk about the process that you've engaged, and others can as well. Lenore Radicchio, who's now the provost at Miami-Dade, is really phenomenal about this, and I would refer you to her if you go down this path to really have the conversation. She'll say the hardest part of this was getting the faculty across disciplines to decide, for business administration, what's the right social science elective? What are the 3 electives we're going to put in there? Right? You have some electives, but it makes more sense to take psychology, perhaps, than something else in the social science department. I made the mistake of mentioning a course once, and somebody said, no, that one. Yeah. But this is the conversation that happens among faculty. I think one of the things that faculty need to be assured is you're not going to lose your job. It's not like we're whittling away any departments. There's still a need for physics. There's still a need for social sciences and for courses in the psychology department. Nobody's going to lose their job. We're still going to have all the disciplines. It's just we're not going to have 50 courses in the pathways in the disciplines, unless it's in that discipline. We're going to have 3 or 4 per pathway. So I think that some of it is just about labeling them. It's the question I always have of people, which is, have you done away with courses? And I think the short-term answer is, by and large, no. by and large, they haven't gotten to that stage yet. What they've done is they've created courses that go in the pathways, but they're waiting for the students to follow those pathways before they close courses. In other words, they're not going to close courses until the choices are being made by students. They're going to let enrollment still dictate what gets closed and what doesn't. And this is the hard part of it. I would say that sort of the basic courses, the 101 courses, is my prediction, are going to be ones where you're going to see increased enrollment and increased course availability. And some of the more advanced courses, probably they're going to have to whittle back somewhat. But I don't know that, I've not heard of anybody who knows which ones have gone away. I think the important question is, oh, good. Well, the important question is, how do you engage in the process so that the faculty really are driving this and helping and making the decisions about what's in each pathway and what isn't? Because that's really a faculty decision. They're the ones who understand what the pathways ought to look like.
And we'll talk a good bit this afternoon. That's one of the primary focuses of our presentation later, and actually you'll hear it from a faculty member from Davidson. But for us, it came down to transferability. So there are 58 community colleges in North Carolina. We have 16 public universities. We do have an articulation agreement, which has recently been revised. But we looked at data. We looked at the universities, and we looked at how, sort of what buckets our courses were counting in. Is it a humanities? Is it social science? Is it a communication or an English course? And then we looked at how it would transfer to the institutions that most of our students transfer. And courses that did not transfer clearly or very well, which did not allow students to go in with junior status. A lot of those are now gone. So, but we will go through the process and how we made those decisions later.
And Josh is right. We don't eliminate the people who are there. We eliminate programs. We find opportunities for them. When we did away with counseling services, the people in those areas went to teach. They had academic areas. They went to teach. A couple of them were retiring anyway, so we're able to do that. And the financial aid office also, we're able to structure in such a way that a couple of the people went to other places within the institution so that they could work. The one person, and he chose to retire actually, but he had a mantra. He used to say often, "Well, I hate meeting students." And I said, "Goodbye then."
And for us, we have all of our students in District 214. It's not the same in 211 and 220, but all of our students by the end of their sophomore year have to decide what career cluster they're going to pursue. And then their junior and senior year, we provide them with an internship, externship, micro internship opportunity for them to see if it is what they want to do or if it's not what they want to do, which is almost as important, But for us, no courses are currently offered in the district that don't lead to another course. And so those are the courses that we eliminated over the course of the last 3 years. It was those standalone kind of electives that in the past kids liked to take because they had an extra period. And we just don't think, kind of like going back to what Josh said, everything should lead somewhere. There's got to be that purposeful next step.
Any other questions in queue? You have one over there?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm going to ask one.
Oh.
There we go. As we talk about these high-performing colleges and your organizations and their performance as well, I wonder the role of disruptive technology. We've been talking a lot about that over the last day. And I just wonder, as you see these higher levels of achievement and the programs that you're all talking about, what role has technology played in helping you get there?
Well, for us, technology has assisted us to do a few things. First, in the classroom, that's where it's most important. Blended classes, the hybrids, and so forth. So faculty have utilized technology very effectively. Also, for us in the administration, we've used it to get more data than ever before so that we are able to make decisions based on data. I know former Secretary of Education, Margaret Spelling, was fond of saying, "In God we trust, everybody else bring your data." I'm close to that at the moment when, especially with dwindling resources, if you want to come and convince me about something, and you don't bring data, well, I send you back. And so technology now has allowed us to be able to get the data that will allow us to go to the next step. And then for our advising purposes, I mentioned counselors. The counselors refused to do anything with the computers. And so over the last 25 years or so, we don't have any records of transaction between a student and a counselor. Today, we have records of transactions between advisors and students. And so technology has allowed us to do that, talk about the pathway. Our position is that a student at 1 a.m. should be able to see all the records that they need to see, if that's when they choose to, and not wait to call the counselor in the morning to say, hey, what class should I be taking? It's all laid out and it's on the computer. If they can do it at Amazon.com, they should be able to do it at our institutions.
It's completely transformed teaching and learning in our district, and within the next 2 years, all of the high school students serving that are in Harper's district will have one-to-one devices. So 211 or 214, our district, and 220 both have online courses that students take already. We're going to move to create a complete online school for our school refusal students in the next 2 years. The first class will start out in the fall. So they're gonna come to you with experiences using technology. I know Florida, and again, going back to the examples that Josh provided with Valencia and Miami-Dade, those high schools in Florida, or students in Florida, are required to take one online course in high school before they even get to the college. And so we want to provide that opportunity for our students while they're with us so that they're ready for the courses and the technology that you're going to be using with them. But everybody's going to have a device, and everyone, at least in 2 of the 3 districts, will be going through online courses or blended courses within the next 2 years. So that's something you have to be ready for.
Now, David? Do they like it?
They love it.
They do.
Teachers love it. Students love it. It's that real time. Whenever and what we're finding is our students are engaging a lot more, which you don't think about, because you can see, you walk into Starbucks, you see 4 people sitting down. It's how they live their lives now. It is how they live their lives, and it's, I think it's a moral imperative for us to de-learn how we were taught, right? To now relearn the world in which they live instead of having them meet us. It's our obligation to meet them in the world in which they live.
Did you want to chime in? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's something a little different. We have an early alert system. We use Starfish, and so for us, that's been a real important technology to enhance communication. When we went to a centralized, and we refer to it as an intrusive advising model, our advisors carry around 400 students per advisor, and so you've got to leverage technology in order to be effective. There's no way a single person can meet, the intrusive needs of that many students. So the early alert, which we have about 95% of our faculty will fill out the flag surveys, and again, we'll talk more this afternoon about what that looks like. But we've made things mandatory for our faculty. Students don't, do optional. Sometimes neither do faculty. So they're required to have Moodle grade books and to fill out the flag surveys. And so that's been a great way for us to communicate to students and match them with the resources they need at the right time versus waiting to the end when it's too late to save them.
You guys have given us a lot to feed on. We're going to have to move on. I have like a 10-second answer that I want to get from the 4 of you as we close out. David? You set a high bar. You said that if somebody comes to you with a 50% success rate, you won't partner with them. What rate of success should we be shooting for?
I think 75. Well, you should shoot for 100. But I think
But you'll partner with us at something under that.
Of course.
What's the number?
Yeah. So we look at our goal for success rate for A's, B's, and C's. We don't consider D's being successful, passing but not successful. A, B's, and C's is 90%. Doesn't mean it has to be there, but that's our goal.
Guys, right down the line.
Every student can succeed in college. And when I say that on campus, they think I'm saying, oh, lower the standards so that everyone... No, I keep telling them, raise the bar. And I use an analogy. It's like someone, a high jumper, preparing for Olympic Games. 4 years, Rio down the road, we can provide them with all the help they need. We can wake them up at 5 a.m., to go jogging, we can rub their legs, we can do everything, we can take them to the stadium, we can do everything. But when the flag goes up for them to jump, that is when they have to jump. But if you provided them with everything, when they have to jump, gold medal.
Yep.
And that is what I
That's
mean
our
by
goal.
saying every student can succeed. We marshal all resources to help them achieve their dream.
Susan.
I would agree. Every student can succeed. It may not be a credential, a diploma, or a degree, and sometimes that requires courageous conversations with students. And that's one of the things we're really talking about now with our developmental education reform. We have now, and multiple measures, we now have students in developmental education who truly belong in developmental education and would probably not be successful in curriculum level courses. And so now what we're doing is really taking a hard look at those students who are at the very bottom of developmental education and, beginning to think about redesigning our redesign and how do you assist those students in recognizing where they can go and helping them get there. But, I think we have the responsibility to improve the lives of 100% of the people who come through our doors.
Awesome. So what's the best of breed number, Josh?
Well,
if it isn't 50%, what are the best schools doing? What should we be thinking about here?
So I would say on the graduation rate, we're seeing 75 to 80% graduation rates. But I would agree with Susan that the goal should be that 100% of students are leaving the college for a family-sustaining wage job or going on to a four-year college and getting a bachelor's degree. That's the measure of success. And completion is strongly correlated with that, so we should absolutely be aiming for completion. But the ultimate goal, if we start with the end in mind, is 100% getting to one of those two things.
Awesome. Josh, I think you did a great job starting us off. And panel, you were awesome helping us drill that down to something we can chew on in our breakouts. Join me in thanking our keynote and our panel. Thank you all. Thank you all.